Ladies and gentlemen, what is Ukraine up to this time? Welcome to another war update from the Warmongers stream. We have Kermit here, we have Hauchi here, and we're going to take a look at the front. I would start with the movements on the deep state map because that gives us at least a partial idea of where things have developed, where someone has advanced, and so on. Can we take a look at it?
Let's do it.
So let's put it this way. For example, in Sumy, the difference over the last 2 weeks, let's say, is really minimal. And where things have moved, they've moved in the direction of Taratuti, right? And simply in the direction towards Sumy. From Russia towards Sumy, you are basically the eastern border in the direction of Sumy. There, the usual process continues where Ukrainians who are losing border areas, border villages, and the Russians are creating their own, how should I put it, sanitary zone, they called it that, by occupying those border areas supposedly to prevent Ukrainians from shooting at or attacking their Russian border villages. Here we can see that in 2 or 3 weeks a fairly large area was occupied of that border area. Do you think this could lead to something else? Or do the Russians really only plan to take those border areas here, which the Ukrainians aren't really defending anyway, because the fortifications are deeper inside the territory and it won't develop any further when we look at the situation near Sumy or east of Sumy?
I'll be honest with you, I have no idea what the Russians are aiming for with this. Whether they're trying to distract attention or they're creating some kind of buffer zone or maybe they're paving the way for something in the future, I have no idea.
I think it's just PR, honestly. That area is completely uninteresting and unimportant.
It's just a PR stunt so they can say they've occupied some square meters so they can make a report. Last month we occupied several hundred square kilometers. It's 100 square kilometers of uninhabited borderland the Ukrainians didn't defend, which doesn't need to be mentioned in propaganda.
But that's how it seems to me.
Otherwise, just to clarify why I'm saying that the Ukrainians aren't defending it, look at what the border looks like. The border is, of course, curved in some way. And you can't defend that line on the map. It doesn't make sense. You'll defend along a geographic line that actually makes sense, like a river, a hill, or a forest. And you won't put any soldiers here unnecessarily. For example, here at Miropoli or behind Miropoli in this protrusion, so that they would be instantly surrounded just by the way the border looks. So you'll put these fortifications here by the river or in that town. And you say to yourself, if the Russians come and take this protrusion here, so be it. There's nothing important there anyway, so we'll just let them have it. We won't leave soldiers here surrounded needlessly. Oh, that's right. So, yeah, confirm, deny, add to it. Well, as already...
I'd really love to tell you something about that, but unfortunately, really, this is just one section of the front in the Ukrainian conflict. I don't have any information about it. So, I can't confirm anything for you at all. I don't even know if the Russian soldiers are staying there, because the maps turn red when they're there, and then nobody checks if they stayed there for a day, 2 days a week, or if they left that same afternoon. It's possible that in a lot of that red territory, nobody is actually there permanently.
It's true that when it comes to occupying territories, sometimes they declare a place as Russian territory just because they saw a drone or a single soldier there, and that soldier is just there. It's not like that Russian territory, the red area, is filled with tanks, soldiers, and drones. Sometimes it looks like there are just 3 soldiers holding the whole line there.
Right here in this salient, there's really nothing except for one hill.
There's really nothing there worth fighting over. Let's move to the next part of the front. Here near Vovchansk, basically nothing happened except that the area of fighting widened. So even here we can see that the Russians are trying to gain control of the border area. However, they are not very successful here. There's probably nothing else to add to that. Or do you have anything about Vovchansk?
In Vovchansk, the Ukrainians are falling behind. It's one of the few places where things have been moving a bit over the past half year. The Russians have already left the city itself.
Vovchansk is occupied now. Everything has changed here.
Yeah, a lot.
Or like in the last half year, it's only moved about 300 meters. Sure, but at a certain point, they just took it all. It happened quickly within days, but has stagnated again for months.
And the Ukrainians on this part of the front, as far as I know, aren't doing any engineering preparations at all, which I hope doesn't come back to haunt them.
It's definitely possible. It's a risk. If the Russians start gathering troops there, it could already be too late. Let's move on and keep going.
Let's keep going.
To Kupiansk. Something interesting is happening near Kupiansk. We can see that the Russians have moved closer to the city again, but the latest reports say that Kupiansk is basically cleared.
The Russians are trying to break through again near Kupiansk, south of Kupiansk.
Yes, to the south.
Yeah, I don't know if it's part of Kupiansk or if it's already its own town. Yeah, Kupiansk the way it's shown here.
You mean like towards Kirashivka?
Yes.
Sure. Well, that's a different city, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, but it's called something similar. I don't know. I'm not that good at Ukrainian geography, but you can just pull up the data. All right, let's move on.
All right.
The Russians were trying to break through. They've been trying there for about a week now. So far, it hasn't led to anything meaningful there.
Okay, let's move on. The next interesting development is around Kosti, I assume, right?
Well, it's a real mess over there right now, isn't it?
Yeah, if we look at what the map tells us, the map shows that the Russians have gotten closer to the city again, and now the fighting is happening in those suburban villages or on the outskirts, so there's fighting going on there now. In fact, the Russians have already occupied some smaller villages in the area, which are probably separate settlements, but more or less, if we looked at what the city looks like, you wouldn't be able to tell where Berestov or Ilivka ends and Kostiantynivka begins. So basically, you could say it's all just one city now. And we could officially declare Kostia a frontline city at this point, with civilians gone, mostly soldiers there, and so on.
That happened a long time ago.
Yeah, that's just how it is now, and I'm thinking that any moment now we should be hearing about the Russians capturing Kostiantynivka. Do you think it will be the classic scenario? The city is strategic, the city is important, the city won't be captured, the Russians are losing a lot of soldiers trying to take it, the Russians have captured the city, but it's been bombed out and is useless?
Well, considering there wasn't that long prelude like with Pokrovsk, where they circled around the city for a year and looked for the best way in, and instead they just rushed in headfirst last year, there wasn't time to create that kind of media wave around it.
So far, there's little discussion about Kostiantynivka. It's unclear if there would be more talk if Iran weren't involved, right? I'd like to go back to Friday. Well, maybe I should say, is anything happening near Lyman? Nothing near Lyman, nothing new, it's all good. All right, Kostiantynivka.
I just wanted to go back to Kostiantynivka. It's not really about Kostiantynivka, it's about the fact that it's the road to Kramatorsk and Sloviansk. Those are the targets.
Yeah, that's true.
Cruz army.
That's true.
Speaking of that, they've been fighting over Chasiv Yar for a long time, and Chasiv Yar is still holding in some sectors.
I wouldn't count it. In my opinion, Chasiv Yar is captured and the Ukrainians are just talking nonsense here. You can't count Chasiv Yar for them when they only hold the last two buildings.
No, it's not really like that when you look at the specific geolocations. Chasiv Yar is still completely in Ukrainian hands.
Yeah, so Chasiv Yar isn't under control. It's not like the Ukrainians are just around Chasiv Yar.
It's not under 100% control. If you're a Russian soldier and you want to take a tank into Chasiv Yar, well, I don't want to lie. Yes, it's still there. I sent you the map. So you can check the geolocations in Kostiantynivka. You see, the direction mainly comes from Bilahora, but if you zoom in a lot, you can actually see it on this map.
Yeah, what do we see?
That's not what I meant. I mean, when you open that page.
Oh, hi. Is something going on? Is something happening already?
Of course something's happening, otherwise there'd be no history.
All right, so we have something now. It's already loaded.
So we have to operate slowly because I have a bit of a small delay there, so I'd like to guide it accordingly.
All right, I'm guiding.
So take a look at Chasiv Yar,
How does it look there?
where they are, what their location is, who has which positions.
I have it right here. Yeah, CSVR. So then we have CSVR. Here we have CSVR. All right, geolocation. Thank you. So according to the geolocations, here we have information that most of the city is more like no man's land. Instead of being held by the Russians, most of the city is under Russian control, but a large part of the city is basically no man's land and isn't held by anyone. And this is already Mykolaiivka, so that's nothing. So what are we actually seeing? I'm not really sure about this. It doesn't really tell me much. It seems the same to me. It seems the same as on Deep State, really.
The city isn't secure. Zoom out and leave it for a moment. And if you look to the right of Chasiv Yar, you'll see by one of the roads between the fields just a little cluster.
Sure.
By Ivanske.
Ivanska, the little group.
The Reds.
Where is Ivansky, damn it?
To the right, on the right. You have it on your right now.
Yes? Well, so what?
There it is, that small spot with the post office. Well, yes, so there, for example, last week or this week, a Russian convoy burned down there. So they didn't even make it to Chasiv Yar, so the city definitely isn't secured from either side, let alone fully under control.
And as for this, well, of course, it's interesting, but it could simply be about drones flying to the rear, right?
Yeah, sure, but when you capture or try to capture a city, you declare it mostly captured and the enemy is still actively hitting your rear areas in that city and beyond, then it's not really captured territory, right?
Sure.
That even those drones just have some operational range, right?
Yeah. Flight range.
Sure.
Before the flight.
So, shall we move on, or is there anything else?
Otherwise, if you look at Kostiantynivka and the number of geolocations there, you can see it's just as much of a mess as Toretsk was a year ago.
We see it.
The only consolidation of forces that is that two or more groups would meet at some designated place and then start making a mess there. No Russian soldier after arriving in Kostiantynivka had been there for less than 24 hours.
Maybe they just don't like the city since they leave so quickly, whatever.
Well, the advantage is that the surroundings are fortunately fields, so the Ukrainians in Kostiantynivka are able to fairly easily eliminate the infantry approaching through those fields with drones. You can see it in the main Russian activity and the direction of their infiltrations. It's through the cottage settlement which is on its eastern side, because there they are able to have at least some cover in those ruins and get as close to the city as possible.
Yeah, is that a cottage settlement? It looks like family houses to me.
Not this one, but the one on the right is more so. It's barely visible.
Aha, I can see something now, okay. The Russians already control the cottage settlement, cottages and people from Kosti. Unpleasant. Well, never mind. Let's move on. The next interesting place will definitely be Pokrovsk. Something interesting happened here. Something a bit interesting happened, which is that the Russians advanced slightly outside the city but it's not any huge breakthrough, not any massive attack that would confirm what we've discussed here, that the Ukrainians don't really have any proper defenses here, so the Russians would advance quickly. They're struggling and making little progress so far.
Beyond Pokrovsk, they're already reaching the first truly fortified areas, so only now will we see how they'll actually do.
Look, here are those fortified lines, sure, but there's no urban area here anymore.
Well, that's exactly why we'll now see how the Russians will do in this environment.
I'm not really a big fan of fortifications. It seems to me that in this part of the war, it doesn't make much sense to have stable fortifications. You need to be very mobile.
Right, you can't afford to be mobile, so you have static fortifications.
No, right. When you have static fortifications, that's the thing. They'll just bomb it because they know exactly where it is.
When you build static fortifications, there are two options. Either I'll keep attacking you constantly and try to break through, or I'll try to go around it so I don't have to take the biggest losses and go through prepared positions. And if you're the defender, both are a win for you. If they attack, they'll lose people and equipment. If they try to bypass you, they'll be going around you somewhere, so you can actually count on them trying to go around you, because there is no other option.
I'm actually talking more about when you have static fortifications like bunkers, trenches, and so on. You're basically telling everyone exactly where your soldiers are. And at that moment, you don't really have the advantage of concealment, for example. You're getting it mixed up?
So you need to distinguish between static fortification types. You have those big fortifications, those are the earthworks and 6 rows of barbed wire and minefields and all that. However, there aren't soldiers directly stationed at those positions. The soldiers' positions are dug in those tree lines between the trees, and they're dug with a minimal profile so that even the construction escapes the enemy's attention and is as unnoticeable as possible.
Yeah, so do I understand it correctly that the fortification looks like there's just a wide obstacle belt, but there actually aren't many soldiers in the obstacle course itself? They're spread out all over the place, and the obstacle belt mainly serves to slow down advancing soldiers.
Yes, and of course it also makes securing the perimeter much easier. If you're flying around Kostiantynivka, you have some fields, a gray zone from somewhere to somewhere, and you more or less estimate its width because you don't know exactly where the Russians woke up this morning when you launched the drone. On the other hand, around this fortification you can just fly back and forth along the line, and sooner or later, no matter how fast the Russians get there, they'll get stuck there for a while and you'll have enough time to strike. It greatly limits your area of operation and makes your job easier, both for artillery and for drone operators.
Okay. So it's not exactly that the soldiers are packed side by side in those fortresses, but it's a combination of classic fortresses that actually serve a different purpose than just hiding soldiers inside.
Yes. Regarding Pokrovsk, I'll send you a link about what happened there recently since you were talking about the advance beyond Pokrovsk. It's actually from today.
And Twitter?
Yes.
So what do we have here? I'm not reading it. Tell me what I see.
The Russians announced the capture of Hrishny. I'm not sure if that's the right way to say it, which is the village, the small town just past Pokrovsk. But then it turned out that it was filmed somewhere 40 kilometers inland.
Oh, sure. So it's just propaganda and nonsense. Geolocation proved they're lying. All right, so let's move on, right? Is there another place where things have moved forward more significantly?
Where? Not yet.
Maybe Huliapolsk? Slightly. Huliaipol. But those are more or less movements on the order of hundreds of meters.
These are insignificant movements. Like, if you think about it, almost all of Ukraine is just flat fields.
Yeah, of course we know that. All right, so regarding the advances, that's covered. Now let's take a look at some of the things that are happening Like, for example, kindness games. Russia is officially introducing propaganda into kindergartens. Crazy. Do we know what that is? Are the kids really gonna play soldiers during class or what?
Yeah, we've already seen it in several forms. Actually, a major decree from the Ministry of Education in Russia introduced these patriotic lessons for elementary schools. And this time, they even moved it into kindergartens. And until now, it was voluntary. And starting next month, it should finally be mandated by law. In every kindergarten, at least for some time, maybe twice a month, these kindness games must simply take place, where as a child you are raised and shaped towards certain values. Because you are the most impressionable at the youngest age.
Well, of course. But at the same time, you're also the most impressionable during puberty, right? Between the ages of 10 and 20. You're really impressionable. As for kindergarten, that's an age that's kind of nothing special, you know? However, what I find more interesting about this is that in this way, the Russian regime is telling us that we have to apply collective guilt. Or, on the contrary, it's saying that we must not apply collective guilt when children are victims of the regime. They're not to blame, they're just brainwashed.
I don't think that's what the Russian regime is trying to say.
I know they're not trying to say it, but they are, aren't they? They're saying something. What does that mean for us? They're saying the kids are brainwashed. It's not their fault. That means when we fall, don't shoot the kids. When they grow up, don't shoot them because it's not their fault. Only shoot those who voted for Putin. Back when the propaganda wasn't so strong yet. Or they say shoot them all because they're beyond redemption.
No, they don't say either of those things. They simply say, we are preparing for a permanent war with the West, and that's why we're indoctrinating even small children, because they're the ones it sticks with the most. From a young age, they'll just drill into your head that dying for your country is the best thing, and actually, the peak of your life is when you go to fight and die.
Yes, research shows it turns out it's a country that worships death, that your life only gets meaning if you die in war.
I've lost.
A death cult that's a bit like the Vikings. Nicméně, however, I'm more trying to focus on the fact that, for example, a documentary called Mr. Nobody versus Putin came out recently, which was a documentary that really excused the Russians. Basically, it was saying, well, the Russians can't help it, they're just manipulated, it's not their fault. Basically, it was excusing Russian society by saying they're just scared and manipulated. Which I find a bit questionable. How should we look at it? If that society allowed all of this to happen, isn't the society itself to blame? Isn't it appropriate to apply collective guilt to that society here?
No, collective guilt is always wrong.
Okay.
You can't just take and say that everyone who, let's say, is blonde, has blue eyes, or is a redhead is just wrong.
All right, so basically, let's say, I don't know if Kermit agrees or disagrees, so our approach should be that the poor Russians, it's not their fault that they've been brainwashed. The ones to blame are the people at the top, even though that's not actually true, right? There are plenty of people there who know exactly what they're doing, just like here, when someone completely rationally justifies to themselves that Andrei Babis is stealing from them, and they still make excuses for him, because supposedly someone else would steal from them too. So in the same way, the guilty one is Andrei Babis / Vladimir Putin, not the stupid people who knowingly listen to him and know very well what's going on.
Then there's this huge good first boys.
Please.
Sorry for jumping in like this, but yes, at the top is Putin. Below him there's another layer, and a lot of people who voted for Putin didn't do it because they necessarily agree with him, but because they don't have any other option.
Well, fair, but a lot of people vote for Putin and they don't care at all what he does, or they know about it and even approve of it. And there will be millions of those people.
No,
And it's not because they're brainwashed, but simply because they're just bastards who want to have good positions in Russia and have power over others. And these aren't high-ranking officials. It starts with teachers at schools. It starts with regular police officers or lieutenants, for example.
Yeah, sure. Like in Russia, there were a lot of cases where a teacher reported a child just because they drew a bad picture and drew a dead Russian soldier.
Yeah, but what I'm saying here is that these people aren't manipulated. They're the ones used to manipulate others. That they know they're holding that position of power and they know they're doing the wrong thing, but they're doing it for their own benefit. Yeah, so we can't say it's not their fault because Putin manipulated them. No, Putin would never have had any power without them.
It's just an exchange. You give me your vote and I'll arrange something. I don't think it's a huge difference compared to other countries. Yep. Today we had Babish here. Babish also says, if you vote for me, I'll make this happen. If there was a profitable war with Slovakia, Babish would say, please vote for me. We'll attack the Slovaks. Those people would vote for him to benefit themselves.
Sure, so they're bastards. So nobody brainwashed those bastards here. Nobody manipulated them. They just consciously make those shitty decisions.
Yes, a part of the population for sure.
Yeah, and that's why I think at least partial collective guilt is justified. That just punishing Putin and the generals is nice, but a huge part of society is just as rotten.
A good parallel is with Nazi Germany after 1945.
Well, yes.
When the Allies actually tried to root out Nazism from Germany, which they simply failed to do. First of all, it survived there. No, they didn't succeed. First of all, it survived there.
No, it's not there, right? It's not there.
What I'm getting at is that they tried for 10 years to simply root out Nazism there. And then they found out that the state simply couldn't function without those people. That means that people who were in the Nazi party returned after a few years to the positions they originally came from, because the state just couldn't function. That means you couldn't punish everyone. Yeah.
But Nazism was eradicated because a huge number of people didn't actually believe in it. They just served it because it was the most advantageous thing to do.
Sure, you do whatever brings you a bonus.
And how should we approach people like that? Who know it's wrong, maybe they don't even believe in it, but they actively bully the weakest and support the criminal regime just because it brings them benefits. Not out of fear, but because they want a better apartment, for example.
The most effective approach here is to offer more. If you offer more, the person will do everything to get that extra.
So our approach to the jerks who help Putin kill Ukrainians and imprison liberals in Russia should be to offer them more than Putin does. So effectively, the best tactic is to be a jerk who collaborates with a scumbag regime. Because when that regime falls, someone who destroys it will offer you more.
Well, that's how it works, unfortunately.
I see why people back Andrei Babish now. They just have it all figured out.
Well, no, I mean, think about it. How would you even want to solve it? Because if you try to suppress them and chase them down and lynch them, it won't really solve anything. There will always be someone else. But the moment you get that kind of person on your side,
the next time he'll betray you for someone who offers him more, right?
well, then you have to be as secure as Stalin, right?
Committer, do you have anything to add?
Damn, this is some debate. What can I say about that? I'd better not say anything about that.
All right.
I'll say that applying collective guilt is always wrong.
I'm discussing partial collective guilt, which some call an oxymoron, but I disagree. You know, because what's the opposite of collective guilt? Punishing the guilty, but that never happens. So I'm talking about partial collective guilt, like you should also focus on those who actively do harm just to benefit themselves. Yeah? I guess so.
So, because if they knew who they were helping, then definitely just... If you're working as a dispatcher in Auschwitz, then it probably applies to you as well, just like that.
So at least a tiny bit of collective guilt, just a little, could be applied.
So, I also sent you 2 photo posts and 1 video in the chat showing what the Ukrainian positions actually look like, where soldiers really sit, not just the trenches and barbed wire we usually see.
Yeah, so we know they're basically just holes in the forest, camouflaged from drones and so on.
Just so you have it as a specific video, the viewers are definitely interested in that.
Camouflaged positions are hidden, so you can't see them. Excellent. So, look, okay. So, we've covered collective guilt. We agreed that we should go as deep as possible in addressing that guilt. Is that right? Yeah, like it's not enough to just lock up Putin or shoot Putin and lock up Zakharova and Peskov and Lavrov. We should include the lower ranking officers too. Thank you.
No,
Well, de facto, yes.
but without lower ranking officers, your army fails. The army won't maintain order then.
What absolutely pisses me off about this is the fact that it clearly shows that if an asshole comes to power, the best and most advantageous thing you can do is to join up with that asshole and work for him, because nothing will happen to you. Because if that asshole is in power, he won't hurt you because you're working for him. And when that asshole falls, nobody will do anything to you because without you, the state won't function. So logically, it follows that when assholes come to power, you should join them. That's the message it gives us. Because if you're not loud enough, if you're satisfied with just becoming, say, a school principal in that asshole system, and that's all you do, then no one will hurt you. Because you're too small to be accused of being a scumbag, but you're too important for the school to function without you. So, collaborate with assholes, collaborate with dictators, collaborate with murderers and criminals, but don't ask too much of them because when they fall, it could take you down with them. But if you're humble collaborators, no one will hurt you. They'll even offer you more. That's unbelievable.
Unfortunately, that's how it works. I don't agree with that, and then a situation arises and it should be rooted out, but to what extent when it's already too deep-rooted?
Yeah, it's actually similar to when Petropavl had a relatively low position under the communists, so nothing happened to him. But that's a bad comparison. Nothing happened to any communist here, so that's actually a completely wrong comparison, totally off.
Yes, like the biggest communists, after the fall of the regime,
They became, for example, owners of big companies and so on.
or prime ministers.
Or prime ministers, yes. Or presidents, after all, yeah, in the end. But you know what? Saying that Petropavl, for example, played it smart because nothing happened to him, that would make sense if communists here were being hanged from lampposts and Petropavl wasn't hanged because he's just a captain, you know what I mean? But considering that communists here mostly just enriched themselves, got into government positions, and nobody did anything to anyone in this country, I think it's absolutely stupid to talk about something like collective guilt here.
But for example, Slovaks still use collective guilt all the time because in last year they tried to expropriate Slovak Hungarians based on the Beneš decrees.
Professor Fiala is the best, an outstanding prime minister and excellent speaker. No, not literally. But alright, let's move on then. It's a tough discussion about whether it makes sense to be collectively guilty or if it doesn't make sense to be collectively guilty. There's probably nothing we can do. That's just how it is. That's just how it is. Basically, let's wrap it up by saying that unfortunately the world doesn't work without bastards, because bastards hold on to the valuable know-how, so to speak.
It's like a kind of Schrödinger-style collective guilt.
Like, you should apply it because it's the right thing to do, but you shouldn't apply it because if you do, your society won't work.
No.
So it's moral to assign like broad blame, not exactly collective, like saying all Czechs are bad because we had communists. But it's absolutely right to eliminate everyone. It's moral. But it's not pragmatic.
It's moral, but where is the line?
The line is when you eliminate all the criminals. Yeah, all the collaborators who destroyed other people's lives. That's the right line. But that's not the practical line, because those bastards who destroyed other people's lives are the ones who held those positions, had the education, had the access, had the things, because they didn't allow others to have that access and those things, right?
So it wasn't moral when the Americans and the Russians raced to get things from Nazi Germany.
No, it wasn't.
That means it means that even NATO is wrong. NATO, NASA.
Well, yes, of course it is.
Yeah, okay, I'm just asking. No, wait.
But I'll study NASA's history like
What? What do you mean?
well, because NASA wasn't what NASA is today. NASA, first of all, what the Americans stole from Germany, all the scientists and these people who later worked at NASA, NASA wasn't founded in 1946 right after they arrived. NASA was founded much later, and originally the rocket program wasn't developed under it at all, but under the US Navy.
All right. Yeah, I definitely took a shortcut. You're right.
Only after the Navy totally screwed it up did NASA get a chance, and because it more or less worked out for them by accident, these people started to have some real use.
With the idea that maybe you could argue whether a scientist who works for that regime is really the culprit, as long as the scientist didn't harm other people, right? I'm more talking about a position of power that influences the lives of other people, so about teachers, officials, officers, police officers, and so on.
Here we run into the issue that if someone was a member of the party that carried it out, then they bear collective guilt.
Yes, they do, but they didn't commit any crime against any specific person.
Well, that doesn't matter, but they're still collectively guilty, right?
Not really, since they didn't commit a crime against anyone.
But the party he supported did do that.
Yes, the party he supported did that, but he personally did not. And what I'm saying here is that neither in Germany nor in our country under the communists, and unfortunately not even in Russia, will those who did harm be punished.
Mhm.
Do you understand? That's the line of collective guilt. Take down everyone who hurt people. That's the line.
Those who actively hurt people.
Those who actively, of course, right? So all those who, I don't know, bullied mothers of children whose fathers were in camps by taking those children away from them, all those who beat people in prisons, yeah, all these bastards. But not the scientists who worked for that regime or for that state, because those scientists were effectively doing science, right?
And what if that science led to, for example, the V1 and those weapons then killed people, right?
That's already the gray area, yeah.
Yeah, I know exactly what I was getting at, man. Because then you can talk about where the line is.
Well, I think the line is when you actively do it yourself, right? Like if you create something that's then used for something else, that's not really the same, is it?
Okay, fine.
Yes, like when someone reported their neighbors, right? That seems to me like a legitimate reason for them to be punished afterwards. When it's an informer, right? When their actions actively lead to a bad life for specific people they've decided to screw over. Just to benefit themselves, you get it?
Sure, I just wanted to know where the line is.
Yeah, kind of like how you'd put the collective blame for capitalism mostly on the people who screw others over. Exactly. But that's a more complicated topic. All right. Let's get into business since we're discussing capitalism. The 20th EU sanctions package against Russia. We've been here 41 minutes, so let's cover it quickly. A ban on selling tankers to Russia and also on providing maintenance and other services for Russian tankers and LNG icebreakers. Stop me if you want to say something about this. A ban on transactions with 20 different banks. A ban on cybersecurity services. Restrictions on operations with the ports in Murmansk and Tuapse, as well as with the Karimun oil terminal in Indonesia. A ban on servicing Russian LNG terminals from 2027. Stricter controls on diamonds. Importers now have to prove that the stones are not connected to Russia. Sanctions against an entity in Kyrgyzstan linked to cryptocurrency trading. A complete sectoral ban on Russian crypto services and exchange platforms, including operations with the Rubex cryptocurrency and support for the digital ruble. Sanctions against 16 companies from China, the United Arab Emirates, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and Belarus for supplying dual-use goods to Russia. This seems to me probably the most interesting so far, that these are not sanctions against Russia, but sanctions against countries and companies that trade with Russia. In other countries. Those are sanctions.
Oh.
Export restrictions for another 60 companies in Russia, China, Hong Kong, Turkey, and the United Arab Emirates. A ban on exports of CNC machines and radio equipment to Kyrgyzstan due to the risk of re-export to Russia. Again, secondary sanctions. Introduction of quotas on ammonia imports. Those are fertilizers. So, a limitation on the amount of fertilizers that can be imported from Russia. Extension of the broadcasting ban to mirror websites of banned Russian media. So a ban on sites like Sputnik Russia Today, or sites like Net24.
Well, I hope so.
So an extension of the broadcasting ban to mirror websites of banned Russian media. Yeah. So basically, if some website is basically just a copy-paste of what Russian media do here, or those Russian media that can't be here, then it should apply to them. That's how I understand it.
Well, that will also be pretty easy to spot.
You'll just be adding some extra news stories there.
Sputnik will be copied by some Chinese website, and you won't be mirroring the Russian site, but suddenly the Chinese site, right?
It depends on whether it's doable like that. Mainly, how are you able to say which site you're mirroring when you're effectively posting the Russian news there? All right, let's move on.
And are you going to enforce that?
How are you going to enforce that? I don't know. I guess somehow someone has to report you first, and then they'll start proceedings against you. Hard to say. For the first time, a Chinese state company was sanctioned for being involved in the production of Belarusian military equipment. Right. So sanctions for cooperation with Belarus in China. Sanctions against 36 Russian companies in the oil sector. Another 46 vessels were banned from entering EU ports and accessing maritime services, bringing the total number of sanctioned vessels to 632. A sanctioned vessel has the advantage that you can seize it if it continues its operations. So do you have anything to add to that? What always fascinates me about these sanctions is that we always find out something is being banned that you thought had already been banned a long time ago, and you wonder how it's possible that it hasn't been banned already.
And that's exactly like...
For example, the ban on servicing Russian LNG terminals. What even is that? Until now, we could sell spare parts and provide services to Russian LNG terminals.
Service them? I guess so, up until now.
That's a mess.
When there was speculation about whether Siemens would deliver those turbines or not deliver those turbines for the Nord Stream. In the end, the answer resolved itself when the Nord Stream blew up, or rather ended up underwater, but...
Yeah. It's just strange how much we're still hooked on Russia. And I understand that there must be some reasons, like maybe we still needed their gas until now, right? So
Wait, hold on. Aren't we the ones servicing their LNG terminals? Aren't we? Not them for us, but us for them.
Yeah, sure, but we fix it so it works so we can take that LNG, you know. You get it? That's how it is. We need it to work, and we know they're complete idiots and can't manage to make it work. So we'll keep it going as long as we need to. That's kind of the logic behind it, maybe. It's hard to say, yeah. But I like that there are larger amounts of secondary sanctions here, but it's still kind of cautious, yeah? It's another batch of problems that the countries helping to circumvent the sanctions have to deal with. And in a way, it makes sense, right? Issuing these huge batches of different sanctions makes sense because basically, as someone helping Russia, you can never know if next time you won't be the one targeted, right? It's about keeping them under constant stress, because if you suddenly imposed all that mess, all the sanctions at once, it would be a huge shock, but Russia would adapt to it and then you wouldn't have anything left to do. This way, when you impose them gradually, they always set up some system, adjust things, then you throw in some sanctions, it messes up their system, they have to readjust, and as soon as they do, you hit them with another package and mess it up again.
And so on and so on.
And so on and so on. It definitely has its pros and cons. So guys.
Yeah, I agree with that. It will do a little something, but it won't solve the problem.
Well, better than nothing.
Sure, better than nothing, but it can still be bypassed. When imports of various machines were banned, people started bypassing it by selling them to Kazakhstan, and from Kazakhstan they were sold and transported to Russia. It will be shipped to Uzbekistan, sold to Kazakhstan, and then sent to Russia.
Well, sure, then next time more countries will be banned and the chain will just get longer, right?
Yeah, sure, it will cost more, it will be slower, and so on, but it will still get where it's supposed to go.
Yeah, interesting info. An interesting detail is that even though Russia is a huge exporter of fertilizers, they actually have a shortage of fertilizers themselves because they prefer to export rather than sell to domestic consumers, since domestic consumers don't have money, right? It's actually a similar story to how diesel is getting more expensive in America, even though they have huge diesel production, because now everyone wants their diesel. So prices at American gas stations are going up, even though they wouldn't have to if the domestic refineries and domestic producers and diesel extractors weren't, to put it bluntly, greedy. It's a similar story. Fertilizers are costing Russians more, and gasoline is getting pricier for Americans due to global trade. Funny, isn't it?
Who was the biggest driving force behind globalization in the 20th century?
Americans and later oil.
Yeah, what a coincidence, right?
However, there's also this interesting aspect that I haven't calculated, but it would be pretty funny if the increased profits from higher oil prices just broke even with the fact that things Russians need, which are tied to the global market and which Russians don't produce or export in significant quantities, get more expensive. Well, in a way, it's hard to say if this will really affect the Russian budget. Probably not. It will affect Russian households, right? But not the budget, since factories will generate money and pay taxes. You understand?
The money has to come from somewhere, right? But we're getting stuck on this again. I'd like to move on.
There's nowhere else to go. I think we've covered everything. Do you want to add anything?
I'd like to move on.
I saw such a beautiful thing yesterday,
Yes.
and it's part of Russian propaganda that has been running against the Czech Republic for a long time. And it actually started with the new history textbook of the 20th and 21st centuries, which was written in Russia in about half a year.
That's fast. Well, and what happened?
Well, when you know what you're supposed to write about, it goes quickly.
You have an assignment.
I don't want to talk directly about that textbook right now, but the Russians have put us on the list of countries that helped and supported Nazi Germany
Well, that's true.
in the war against the Soviet Union.
Like, is that so? It is absolutely true historically.
But do you know what's funniest about it?
Well, go ahead and tell me.
We're labeled there as the main supporter in Central Europe. And the fact that we were a puppet state, nobody cared about that. But the Slovaks, who declared a fascist state and voluntarily joined the Germans, they get recognition for that.
Ah, that's a shame. It could have been beautifully objective history. Well, never mind.
So it didn't work out again.
It didn't work out again. What a pity.
Well, everyone knows that the real World War didn't start until 1943.
The real World War started in 1937 and ended in 1949. That's what the Chinese say, if I'm not mistaken. In 1937, Japan attacked China, and that war ended in 1949, right?
No, that war with China ended in 1945, and then the Civil War started.
Yeah, sure, but that's basically part of it.
Yeah, sure, but if we want to go that way, we can go back to 1937 or even 1935, because there was actually the war over Manchuria.
Actually, 1911 with the fall of the emperor, right? De facto.
And the emperor fell. Why? Because of the colonial powers.
The World War started even before the First World War was resolved.
Yeah, if you want to go that way, then yes.
No, okay, of course, it's hard to draw the line on when the Second World War began and the end of the Second World War. But I would say that the Chinese would explain to you very clearly that the war started in 1937 because that's when the Japanese attacked us, and it ended at the end of our civil war when we proudly defeated the Kuomintang. And that's it.
Look, I kind of agree with the Chinese. I see the beginning in 1937, but the end in 1945.
Yeah, someone else here writes that it started in 1934 with the civil war in Spain. No.
Since the Spanish Civil War isn't related to World War II.
No, it's not. It ended before World War II even began.
Its effect had almost no impact on World War II.
The only thing that was achieved there and is connected to the Second World War are the German and Italian legions, where the Germans tested their tactics.
That's right. So regarding the textbook, what can I say? Russian history. History happens and everyone writes it the way they need to. And historians, real historians, try to interpret them as they are, and then they get hate from patriots for it.
Yes, history is like laws. They're meant to be broken and rewritten.
Yes. So thank you for the update. It was an exhausting 54 minutes today about Ukraine, and I think that for today, this 3-hour war podcast, the Lucas 4 deserves applause and thanks. Thank you so much, guys, for being here, and thank you to everyone for watching. Remember, you can watch the full 3 hours on Hero or as members. We had quite an intense discussion here about Andrei Babish and his scams, but that's only in the full recording. Otherwise, Iran and Ukraine, as you can see. Bye. Take care.